Hello, welcome to Low-Code Campfire. This is episode number 159 for August 16, 2024. This is an Open Lines Friday, just because I'm not imaginative enough to think of another title. But this is, well, first let me introduce myself. Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantain App. Today joining us, Patrick Anderson, Technical Success Manager for Plantain App, and we'll see who else drops in from Plantain App side. This is an event that we do every Friday at this hour to get together, talk about Plantain App and techniques and things that might save you time, help somebody else along the way. This is all skill levels welcome, from beginner to expert, and we do have some experts already on the call. We record all these and put them out on our YouTube channel, so youtube.com/plantainapp. You can get all kinds of really good information from those. We'll run this agenda. We always say hello, and then we'll go around the campfire. If anybody has something they want to get to, something burning that we need to get to first, we'll do that. Any submitted topics, and then we have a variety of other things we can dip into. After an hour or so, we'll jump into our Afterglow segment. We turn off the recording, have an ongoing, just continue the discussion, or raise a virtual beverage, or otherwise enjoy each other for a few more minutes. So do engage with us. You can submit questions and topics in advance. You can use that QR code, or you can send an email to support@plantainapp.com. Hello all, welcome, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello, hello.
And as I'd hoped,
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. As I'd hoped, we have Andrei Nemish with us. Andrei, maybe you can say your title and what you do, but a longtime employee of Plantain App.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrei and I'm working as a TSM right now at Plantain App. Firstly, I started in 2019, so 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago. And I started working in the implementation team, so I was delivering projects to our clients along with the team. And now I am in the same team with Patrick, so we are the TSM team now, and I'm glad to be here today.
Technical success managers, always trying to help our clients move forward with the product. And Andrei didn't know I was going to just throw it right to him, so we got the uncomfortableness out of the way right away. But
no problem.
glad that you joined us.
I'm glad that I'm here too as well. Thank you.
So as promised, we go right to first call. If anybody has anything we can jump into, address, help with, or commiserate with, we'd love to do it. I have picked out, we call these, thanks to Mark Yulsing, we now call these campfire logs, and we'll be happy to throw on another log if you have one to put on the fire. So while you're thinking about that, I will just tell you I have several things that I've picked out that are I think, interesting, and also we can make mention of DNN Summit, which is coming up in February. We hope everyone can attend that as well. So, all right, now you've had a chance to think about it. What are we going to throw on the fire?
I have nothing on my mind.
Well, that's okay. It's when we have these uncomfortable silences until we get started, and then it just rolls. So don't worry about that.
I was thinking to Sergio, but nothing for the moment.
So we'll just do a quick check-in on the version. We released 1.26 on June 13, so this is just over 2 months ago. It's really in pretty good shape. I was in a management meeting earlier today, and listening to the development team, and from what I can tell, the cleanup on that, any adjustments are stabilized. I don't think that there's anything in front of our development team to work on 126. So we're in very good shape on that one. I guess there are a few. No, okay. I'm sorry. There are a few things that are still going on, and we'll be working on those. It's mostly complete. So we'll continue to update you on that. We have plans to move our console, which is one of our most critical systems, console.plantanapp.com, the one you use to do support tickets and manage your account if you're hosted with us. But that site is going to be upgraded just over a week from now using the 126, and that's kind of a big indication of how mature and stable the version is. That one just has to work right for us, or else you guys have problems with our software. Good. Anybody with comments on 126? While we're talking versions, I will also mention that developers are hard at work at 127. We talked this week within our product team about packaging our roadmap so that you know where we're going. And I mean, we know where we're going. We haven't been doing a great job of communicating it recently. So now we have a new pattern, and so you can expect to hear more from us. And I'll be talking about it here in this meeting as well. We are also talking about our release cadence and things like that. So we are definitely making progress on a roadmap and the things that you'll see in the version or two down the road. All right, last chance for you to bring up something, and then I'm going to jump into something that happened last week. Here it goes. So we went into the Afterglow segment and we had a good conversation, and then somebody asked a question, well, how do I do this? What's a nice way of displaying a message from a listing? Because I've been using display error message, and that's not very friendly. There's other ways to display messages. Toast gets a little bit of, the toast actions are another way to display. But what if I want to do something more custom? So we put together something in that Afterglow segment, and then the comment was made, well, gee, wish the recording had been on. So I'm going to go back through that one and just show the technique, and maybe we can talk about ways you can build on it, or maybe Andrei has a better way. Andrei has deep experience with the low code of this product. So let me show you what we put together last week, and I've just packaged this as a campfire contribution, and I'll throw this into out for discussion. Anybody who has a technique and they want to share it to save some time for other people, you can get access to campfire.plantanapp.com. If anybody on this call doesn't have it, I think everyone does, but so long as you come to the Low-Code Campfire, you can get access to all of this. So I put it out as a contribution so somebody can go in and take a look at it and understand. So let's look at the end product here real quick. We have a listing, and I want to show a message. So for example, if I want to show some information about this, I can click it. It's a sample message. It just says hello there, but pop-up form. I've wired the same mechanism to the send award button over here. So if I want to send Mark Buelsing an award after it finishes processing, it can pop up a nice message that the award has been sent to Mark or Matt or whomever. So nice pop-up form. That same form is used in two different places, and yet it's the same form. So just a quick tour of that. The setup of the form, it's a separate page. It's a form that exists on a page. It has, this one's a very simple implementation. It has the characteristic that if you pass a message on the query string, that message gets displayed in the form. It's a very, very simple implementation. So long as you can pass it a message, it's going to display that. And if we look at the design of this thing, the static text it's using get message to get the message off the query string. So it's assuming a pretty simple message, simple and short and limited in characters. But it just displays it. And then the other setup that was necessary to do this is in settings advanced, we clicked on embed and saved the form with embed turned on so that you get this URL and the URL. It gives you a lot of information about the URL in this thing, but the thing that we really need is the embed URL. And so from this point forward, where my cursor is, until the end of the next quote, that URL gets us the URL we need to open this form. So back on our, before I go on, Don, since you're so polite and raised your hand, jump in.
Okay. Quick question on the message in the form where you had the get and you had an ampersand message. Why ampersand message?
Oh, well, what I did here, and it's kind of static text highlighted this in red for me. What I did is I provided a default value. So if you arrive at this page without this default message just showed. So this is the thing that when we go to this page without anything, it's showing you that there's a form here and that we didn't provide one on the query string. It's just
Yes, I get that
placeholder.
part, but why ampersand message?
Well, so if you're implementing this, I mean, you've got to do a query string. If it's the first parameter, you do a question mark. If it's ampersand, if it's the second one, you do an ampersand. It's the standard rules of query strings. But I just shorthanded it and said,
you could just as easily say no message parameter provided on query string.
That's probably
like that.
Thank you. Let's
yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to say that so that you don't.
Oh, I get it. It's not coding. It was just you trying to show that you meant something in the query string.
Correct.
And the ampersand message was red. I don't know why.
Yeah, just because that static text does some interpretation.
Yeah, okay. It's an editor and has some checks in the back. That's why it was red.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was confusing a bit.
Yeah. So maybe this is a better way to do this. It says it's just letting you know it's missing. And so if you here's what happened when I was setting up this contribution and trying to show it off. Originally, I just had get message as the parameter here, and get message was blank. So this whole form was coming up blank, and you couldn't even tell there was a form there. So I provided a default value. I didn't do it very well. So I think this is a better showing off of the technique. So sorry for that confusion. Thanks for raising it. So we've done the setup. We have a blank form. We have a embed code. And then so we go over to our listing and take a look at it. And I've used the same thing in two different places on buttons. So one button is the show a message button. That's as a root button. And all it is a redirect to URL action that uses that embed URL. So everything that I said was from the quote sign to the end of the quote, which was all of this, everything to the left, was just copy and paste. And then I wanted to pass the message, whatever message I want to pass. In this case, I'm passing hello there. And that's the message that's going on the command line. And so that's the message that's going to pop up in that pop-up box. We clicked open in pop-up, so it shows. Here's a nice place to put the title, so it pops up and says sample message. The other one, using the same form, but the exact same technique. I did the send award. The idea is that you would do a stack of actions that actually sends the award to whoever gets it or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. But then in the end, you're going to show a pop-up that says, well, everything succeeded. So here's this exact same URL. And now the message is the award to, and then token for the name coming out of the row, since this is an item button. Same thing, open and pop up. I have this nice title, award sent. And so out of all that, we get If you click this one, we get the hello there message. If you click this one, you get the award sent message.
This is a good point to ask a question.
Please.
And perhaps you guys talked about this when you were having this session last week. But I was wondering, why did you decide going this direction as opposed to a form on the page that you open? They use the open and pop up action.
We did talk about that, and that message, that technique was definitely, that was kind of where we started, and this is where we ended. The idea is that this mechanism could be used throughout your application to deliver messages.
Okay, so you use the same form wherever you are. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And then, oh, Andrei, please jump in.
Yeah, just as a note, you can also do it with a custom detail view action on that button without using the redirect URL action.
Yes.
So you can use it there, and you can put the embed URL in that action as well.
Let's thank you for that. Let's take a look at that.
It's just an idea, so you can see that we have different approaches and have the same result.
So if we were to, we were saying, so this is, we'll do another button here. This is going to be revoke award. And so you're pointing out a custom
Detail view.
Detail view can be done, and and so you're saying that the embed code could be popped in here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but you'll have to
have the
set
entire
it as a model in there.
Yes.
So as a display mode.
Oh,
just above the title. Yeah.
Above the title, yeah.
Yeah.
Modal, and then the entire script needs to be there,
yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
So we go back to our embed form, and in this case, we need to get that embed code, and it's, instead of part of it, it's the whole thing, because this is it needs to have the script. We're not redirecting.
Yeah, that's correct.
HTML, we're going to just include that entire script. Save.
It may be a bit different because the model from the listing has a different approach than the form, but it should be pretty much the same.
Let's see what it does. So we'll revoke Ben's award. I forgot to send the query. I forgot to send the message. So we got our default message, but which is actually a good message now. Right? Award revoked. So let's do this. We don't need this. Got to clear up where I am. I get confused pretty easily. So revoke award just needs in our custom detail view, in our script where we pass this, we need to say SO.
What would that look like if the message you want to pass were just typed in this box instead of the pop-up thing?
Yeah, let's work on that one next. I think that's a good question. So now we got our pop-up form doing it, and then let's add one more here to do what you just mentioned. So
that looked nice, by the way. Yeah, before you move on, that was nice.
We can't make up our mind what we're doing here. Detail view that is a modal. So now we've got several ways to do the same thing. This one uses the URL pop-up method. This one uses the custom detail view method. This one uses custom detail view and doesn't show the remote form. It just shows the message. And this probably would have answered the original question, right? Being that we were talking about last week. How can I easily show in a nice way this a message on the screen? And this does that. The other technique, the technique of using a form that's displayed throughout can have other benefits, and among those that if you want to capture acknowledgement, for example, of the, yeah, I saw the message, and so they have the or I agree. You could put buttons on it. You could record the fact that it happened. So using a form gives you some more things that you can do with that. If you're just trying to communicate the message and you don't need any additional logging or interaction, then this technique would be the simplest one. So Andrei, you've already contributed. Thank you for adding to that.
Glad to help.
So now we got different ways to do the same thing. So that was, and then, that's just out there for anyone to benefit from. It occurs to me, we also, the discussion last week also was, okay, this using the message parameter was pretty simplistic, and it demonstrates the technique really well. But there would be any number of things that wouldn't work well like that. You could have special characters that would be misinterpreted on the query string. You could, it could be a long message, or you want a nicely formatted message. So there are other ways to pass a message to another form. You could do it in data. You could do it with sessions or cookies. So you build up a nice long message with HTML or the special information that you need, and then or even JSON somehow, but or just pass a record ID that where the message is coming from, and then the form could do that extra work of displaying it. So if you needed something longer, more involved, that would be a way to do it. Make sure that is a word. All right. So that was the only contribution, and I did that 10 minutes before the meeting. So at least we have, one more. We try to add to this on a regular basis. If anybody needs any help contributing, I'm always available for that. All right, we can go back. Is there anybody who's now thought of something you want to talk about? Throw a log on the fire. Matt, hello.
Well, this is actually back on the previous topic. I'm always late to the game, sorry. So in the last context, what would be the preferred method of allowing somebody, when they see a pop-up, to give them a choice? So you send them a message, and then ideally in this, you would have, not ideally, in this case, you'd have buttons: continue, stop, choice A, choice B sort of thing. Would that be best done in an embedded form? Is it possible? Is it possible inside one of these messages? What say you? Well, I know it's possible, obviously, if you code the button in HTML to do, say, a redirect, but within the context of plant and app.
How about a dynamic pop-up form?
For I would say, so the third method, where we're just displaying a custom detail form, that's not going to be real easy to add a button or an acknowledgement or actions to. You could do it with JavaScript, but I've said 1,000 times I'm not a JavaScript guy. I probably wouldn't do it that way. So for me, so now the question becomes some kind of a form, and Patrick's point earlier, you could put a custom form on the page. If the acknowledgement that you're doing is a one-off local to this page, then I would probably put the form on the page and pop it open and completely control the experience here. If it's one-off, if it's throughout my application, I always want people to acknowledge a message, then doing it with the embed method would provide the benefit of being able to use something that's central one time and invest all your efforts into that.
Yeah, I've used that method a lot for more complex things than, because unfortunately in listings, if we you have the option on a button to do a confirmation, but the confirmation is just a continue or stop. You can change the wording on those buttons, but that's all you have.
Right.
Is it? Yeah. You don't have anything more complex than that. In forms, of course, we have the display message option, which you can attach buttons to, so that you can, in a form, you have that logic where you can say this button is we're going to display a message, and then you attach buttons to that message to have further logic. But we don't, at least I don't think we have anything that matches that in listings. So yeah, I've used the pop-up form quite a bit for that sort of logic. And usually it's a form that's on the page. I just, it's on the same page, and I just use the action for popping up a form.
Patrick, I'm on the same page with you.
Yeah.
Literally?
Air quotes.
I was on a call yesterday with Matt, and I expressed my concern for the degeneration of the word literally.
Agreed.
I'm literally on the same page with you is the kind of thing I try to avoid saying.
Yep.
Unless we're standing on paper. Okay. Now I'm going to move on. Always welcome for a new topic. Here's your chance to raise your hand. Here we go. I don't know if anybody saw on Low-Code Cafe, but I demonstrated a technique for time zone adjustment that I thought it was something I learned this week. So I thought maybe really, there we go. I thought, if you don't know this, it would be a good one. It wouldn't surprise me if Andrei was behind actually coming up with this at some point. So there's, I guess first I'll demonstrate the problem and the solution, and then we can figure out what else to do with it. So I am going to turn off my solution. I have a listing here. Nope. I have a form here that has a solution built into it, and I'm going to turn it off to demonstrate the problem. So if you were to generate a form, if you were to generate an entity that uses a time UTC field type, and you edit the field, the default forms that we provide. See, for example, this has the value of 6 p.m. When I edit the form, the time changes from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And when I save it, it now saves it as 11 p.m. And if I edit it again, it adjusts it to 4 a.m. Every time it's changing by 5 hours. It's the difference between me and UTC. And so that's what's happening. So, bug. Anybody else having ever run into this bug? We have it in our list of things to do
Many
to fix
times.
this bug. So the solution that we implemented is that it's a two-part thing. First, we need the form that edits this, the listing form, needs to know how many minutes difference I am from UTC. And this is something that listings know and forms don't. So if we go into our button for editing a form, it's we've modified this open form pop-up and stop execution, which initially only had to pass the notification subscription ID on the query string, the ID. Now we're also passing the time information, time zone. We're passing the query string time zone, and this is a value of -300 for me. It's the number of minutes different from UTC. So this is step one. We pass that to the form. And then the thing that I had commented out on my form, and I'll put back in, is after we read, so we're reading notification and getting the data. This is what happens by default in our automatically built interface. So it's outputting that to the value original, which can be then used on the, for example, our digest time displays original digest time ISO. It's retrieving that. Well, the workaround solution that we've implemented, and I'll put back into place, is that after reading it, we modify it. So we create a new value for original digest time ISO. And what we're doing is, and this one is actually, it's a little bit, we've actually come up with a simpler version of this, but the idea is this. We put that original value into an expression, a core token, and include the offset, which is the time zone. So this is subtracting 300 minutes and outputting it in the format of hours and minutes. So we take in hours and minutes that says 6 p.m., but convert it is in UTC time. We subtract however many minutes between us and UTC so that it displays correctly. So so now with that fixed, it stays 4 a.m. It doesn't move. I don't really want that at 4 a.m. So I'm going to change it back to 6 p.m. or some reasonable time. But now it stays where it belongs by way of a workaround. So was I the only one that was unaware of the problem or unaware of the solution? Or is that new information?
My way of getting around it was using SQL, actually.
So, was it the same principle, subtracting?
Let me see. So what I basically did was I was saving my time, obviously as UTC. I was then sending it to SQL and then returning it as an ISO time because I was having trouble getting the date in the correct ISO format. So I used SQL to basically do it so that I could just get that ISO time back easier. And then I use the date time convert with the time zone to UTC, whatever, so that or whichever one I needed to get the correct time back. So yeah, I did the same thing you did. I just took an extra step, like you got the actual format for the correct ISO. I was just having such a hard time doing that. I said, you know what, to heck with this. I'm just gonna tell SQL to format this date as assist date time offset, and then just give that back to me. And that gave me the ISO as I needed. But I like your way better because that subtracts SQL out of it. So it's one less thing because my SQL server is separate. So I don't have to hit the SQL server. I can just have the website do all of the work.
So after we implemented that more complex looking token, there's another token, and this kind of brings up another a useful thing that we did recently. I just added this to the documentation. Date time relative now has a relative to thing, and so you can, rather than without relative to, all that date time relative would do would be to add to the current date and time. You can add or subtract days, months, years, minutes to the current time. With relative to, you can add or subtract to anything. So, and I actually updated the documentation, so I'm going to make you look at it. In tokens, the core tokens, we have date and time as a topic. And so we have some examples of relative to. So you can add 6 days to Christmas and get New Year's Eve. And then just a reminder that whatever you know, the same expression, but you can add the formatting string and get out what you want to. So this is the default output. This is the same thing, but formatted in the way that I wanted it to, with a standard formatting. From
relative to is added in 126 and above.
Yes. Let's verify that. Relative to was in the release notes for 126. So yes, 126 and above. So this kind of shows off that you can do a daytime relative to 2,200 hours, take away 300 minutes, and get the answer 1,700. So this is this same technique could be applied to my instead of using where is it, this more comp, nope, where is it, this more complex variation is kind of harder to explain. It says that we're inserting the time. This date time convert needed an actual date, so we're taking a date and an arbitrary date, and then inserting a time into it, and then formatting it. It's a little harder to see and understand. If we used this variation, you can just see that we're adjusting it by the time zone. So, and then the time that we're adjusting is this original digest time. And we want it in hours and minutes. So let's not do this one and do this one instead. So this will create something that we're just not using. This is, so now we're just using daytime relative to this time that's coming in. We're adjusting it by that and formatting it in hours and minutes. So we should get the same functional result here. Yep, comes in at 6 p.m. But a little simpler to look and understand. Anyway. All right, so that was covered in Cafe, and now it's been covered here, so it's well covered. Questions? All right, still time for your topics. I have more. All right, here we go. I was hoping we wouldn't get here because this is me talking about my failures. I was working on a project recently that had some automations involved, and the idea was separation of concerns, meaning I wanted to make different automation jobs do different parts of the same process so that you could turn on or off any part of the process very simply with the on-off switch of automations. So I could have built one big thing that would have done all the work, but instead I built 4 little things that each did a piece of the work. And I blew it on 2 different ways. So the first one was, but I think it took me a minute to figure it out. Actually, it took me an hour to figure it out. So I wanted to save you that hour. The idea was that I had an automation I had 4 different automations, and for simplicity, automation A just said, okay, this is something new to the process, and all it's going to do is move it into status B. When something was, and so this was one job. I'm simplifying here, but this was one job. Job B would run and say, well, I'm going to make some decisions, and if it's one way, I'm going to move it to status C, and if it's another condition, I'll move to status D, and there were some other statuses here, E and F, whatever. And so this was all about sending emails, and the idea was this was the thing deciding, am I sending the email or am I putting it aside for review? And I started noticing that even though things were set up to in my code, in the data, it was said, okay, emails are going to go for review. I noticed they were sending, and that can't happen. Things that need to be reviewed before they're sent can't be sent immediately. So there was something wrong in my process, and it wasn't immediately evident. When I got down into it, the issue was that this thing, job B, was doing some SQL that said, well, if this is a B status, I'm going to check to see if they have what is the word? Don't email me. They've opted out. Have they opted out? Well, if they've opted out, I'm going to move it over here. Then I'm going to check if it's a B. I'm going to check to see if it's a test mode. Oh, if it's test mode, I'm going to move it over here. And then I had another SQL that said, is this an item that needs to be reviewed? If it doesn't need to be reviewed, put it over here. Finally, if none of those things were happening, it moved it on into D, which ends up the job of D was to actually send the emails. The mistake that I made in this is because these are separate jobs, A keeps running, and A was inserting new. A said, okay, I got new stuff, I'm going to call it a B. So there was no predicting in this process where we were in that. Any of the 3 steps that could have sent it over to C could be running. And then the final step was send it to a D. So if it sent it from A to B, when that final statement was about to run, it says, okay, this is a B. I'm going to change all B's to D's, and on we go. So it was a bad design for automation. It could get inserted into the middle at the wrong time and then get picked up and moved to a D. So did anybody understand what I did wrong? I mean, does that make any sense? Or have I just talked in circles?
Are you saying that when you inserted records to go as an email, the parameters that you would check to determine at the time that it's set up as B, the parameters you would check aren't necessarily set at that time, that something else can modify it, and that's why it was getting picked up at the wrong moment?
I think maybe it might be clearer if I show.
Because I've done something similar where my email manager has that same thing, like do not send until this day. Is it a test record, things like that, and depending on what it is, it won't pick it up for send. But I address all of those values at the moment that I insert the record. So there's no possible way that the other job can misunderstand that record and do the wrong thing with it, because it's not like I'm inserting it with a null value and then later updating, the test value or the do not send until value or something like that, where that secondary job that's sending the email is accidentally going to pick up that record. I make sure that the moment the record's inserted, it's inserted complete.
And that's what I didn't do. I didn't have good control over my statuses. So imagine this here. This one, the purpose is to allow opt-out. And so I'm doing SQL to say, if anything is in the starting send status, you know, and whatever the status is, but the result was I changed it to opted out. And then I have another one that says, well, if it's starting send and it's test mode, excuse me, and we determine it's something that should be test, well, I changed the status to is test. My final thing is saying everything that's left in starting to send, change it to send. And this was the mistake. If between this SQL statement and this SQL statement, the other process inserted a starting send item, and so this SQL, I don't have any control over what any other SQL is doing, right? So a record got inserted, but and it happened to be between while this job was executing. This SQL runs. Now it's running independently, and it says, okay, if there's anything in starting send, flip it to send. And so this statement was operating on something that just got queued and didn't get the benefit of all these other SQL statements. So it was a bad design for, I didn't control my statuses really well. Ben, please.
I understand what you're saying now. Because I see what you're doing is that you're affecting the table directly, everything
Yes.
that's in the table. My way that I did it was, see, I thought it was that you were maybe potentially putting in records that didn't have the correct statuses at the time or something to that effect. But what I've done to alleviate this type of situation is my very first action in that automation is a load entities from SQL. I take a snapshot of everything that is in the table right now that has not yet been processed. And then I only loop through those records. So if another record gets inserted as the process is running, it's going to get ignored because it wasn't picked up in the initial pickup.
Yes.
And then the next time the system runs, it picks up what's left. So it's a true queue. It's what is in the queue at this instant that I start. So any further inserts are going to have zero effect on the process because it already picked up the records that it's going to process.
And that makes perfect sense. So I'm like any other programming, there's multiple ways to do things and maybe even reasons why it's a good idea. And so I fully understand the idea of what the methodology you're talking about. One thing that might let's see. One reason that you might want to do more direct manipulation of the SQL instead of, if you don't want to do it in low code, if you don't want to loop through a list, but rather want to do it in SQL because of large amounts of data or things like that, there might be reasons why it's better to stay to do it the way I did. If you want to, there's I'm not arguing your method. I liked your method that if you put it in a list, then you can't get interrupted. But since I made the mistake, I wanted to point out the solution, which is in this case, what I'm doing now is the very first thing, the very first action. Actually, the status that was killing me was merged. Other things could get inserted into merged, and so what I'm doing now is saying merged becomes starting send, and so now I'm only operating on starting send. Nothing else is inserting things in as starting send. So I have a controlled set of records that I'm going to do something with throughout this process. There's going to be 3 different diversions: to opt out, to is test, to is review, and then finally we push it on. But I've prevented another job from being able to interact with me. I guess the, um, I, I, and I, I'm just, I'm not arguing your method. I liked your method that if you put it in a list, then you can't get interrupted. But since I made the mistake, I wanted to point out the solution, which is the since I made the mistake, I wanted to point out the solution, which is the very first thing, the very first action. In this case, what I'm doing now is the very first thing, the solution, which is the again, I did it wrong and I'm owning up to it. But the other thing to pay attention to is that when you separate things out into different jobs, that the jobs are running on their own schedules, that if you don't take that into consideration, you could get what look like unpredictable or incorrect results when in fact it's just jobs run on their own schedule. Okay, so I'm gonna finish ripping off the Band-Aid of the things that I did wrong. The other thing that I did wrong is I said the job that I was just showing you is coded to say do the work. Every time I change the status, I check for the 3 different ways it could go. I do the final change. Everything left goes to send, but I never checked, is there anything to do? So I have this series of SQL that's running over and over again that is doing all the work, when really the first question should be, is there anything to do? Because if there's not, don't tax the SQL server. And so when I get a text from Bogdan on a weekend saying, how come the server's running so slow? Yeah, it's I didn't think very well through. I mean, you can design things that work well that perform poorly, and so just kind of keep an eye on your design and how often things loop and whether or not it quits as soon as it can, things like that, especially for automations. Nobody else is admitting to ever having done that. So
that's good advice, Dale. I'm always conscious about that.
Dale, we don't make mistakes, only you.
Yeah, well, and I am glad to serve as the poster child. So yeah, let's so then, other perform, so now this is not a mistake. I've made this mistake too, so why not? As a low coder, there's a real temptation to do things in low code, right? So you create a list, you loop through the list, you do all your work, and it might be several workflows, or I mean, you it might be 1 step or 20 steps that happen through low code, and sometimes that same thing can be done. I mean, just like anything else, you can do it other ways, and one of the other ways is SQL. So if the penalty gets higher, the larger the volume of records that you're doing, I think. So, for example, if you have a process that, well, my tangible example was I was trying to import from HubSpot, and I was taking a low code, one at a time approach to it. So I get a contact from HubSpot. I'm going to write these. I'm going to do this different auditing, editing, writing records, checking for things. Do I already have this on file? And so there's the SQL or the read. Is this email on file? And then if it is on file, I'm going to do this. If it's not on file, doing that. And so it was a many step process. It ran. I designed something that ran for hours and hours, not 10 minutes. An alternative to that would be you get all that information in and you process it in bulk using SQL with a query that on checking for on matches it does this, on new records it does that. So what was days could be done in 10 minutes. You can code them efficiently or inefficiently, pull out the right tool for the right job. Pretty much if you're handling 1, 2, 10, 50 records, there's no problem with doing it step by step in low code. If you're doing tens of thousands, you might want to think about other ways to do it. now I'm going to call names. Patrick, have you any experience with any of that?
Nothing I can think of offhand. I'm sure I have, but
Andrei, you must have done some imports that can be done well or poorly.
Yeah, it happened to me.
I know we're writing a play on this to say, for example, how to do large imports. Just wondering if you had any either horror stories or success stories that you'd like to share.
well, I know that that with one client we had we were doing the looping and it was calling an API and getting data from somewhere else, and there were a lot of records, and it just really it never was able to. We were looping through records, and we were doing doing them in batches, and no matter what we tried, it never could really complete it. And we tried many different ways of doing that, and in the end, we ended up just they exported all their data into SQL, brought it into the database, and did everything through SQL, and that worked well. So, yeah.
One of the things to remember on a case like on the case where you're having trouble, and I encountered it too. This is an application that runs under IIS. From time to time, IIS decides to clean up, whether it's on its own on a schedule or because of memory load or whatever, and so it'll shut things down, and it'll give a certain amount of grace period to a running job to let it finish, but then it might finish ungracefully. So if you have something designed to do one by one and it takes hours to run, you have to assume at some point IIS is going to do its reset, and now the job isn't running and things are left in a partial state. And so anyway, short-term things, low-code very effective at. Long-term things that just keep running and don't have a queue mechanism built into them can have challenges.
Yeah, but in terms of performance, it's a better way to use the queue method. So I remember a few years ago, me and Andrei, we had to migrate the client from an old platform to a newer one, and the problem was that the websites couldn't be online in the same time, so we had to make an export of all the data they had in the old platform, then turn it off, then move it to the new one. And they had thousands and thousands of data, and we had a few issues with timeouts from the database, which is normal when we have a lot of data. And yeah, we made the mechanism with queues. So yeah.
Jim, I think since you raised your hand, you get the last word on the topic. We're almost done for
Well,
the day.
and I think that Andrei added what I was going to say, which was I do a lot of imports like that, and I've had to come with a hybrid mechanism where I'm loading a lot of those records into a SQL queue and then processing the queue when using low code, where I can control it, detecting which ones have to get worked on, and then because a lot of mine have to deal with API calls and things like that, but they just stay in the queue till I have time and availability in the system to work on those kind of scenarios.
Ben is not going to let you have the last word.
Sorry.
No, no.
No, I was just gonna say one other thing is I've had situations because I deal with education data and a lot of student records, especially as the year progresses for the school year, it gets very unwieldy. At the end of the school year, we're talking one file export has in the vicinity of about 65 million records. As you can imagine, that depending on how that's processed, that could be a nightmare in time to compile and to export. What I was finding, I tried every method. I tried SQL directly. I tried using lists to pull out the data. I tried parsing the data into pages. I did end up with the idea of the paging to only just so that I can offer the user some updates, because if I pull all the data and process it, I couldn't really give feedback. But if I did it in pages, like, for example, 200,000 records at a time, every 200,000 records, I can give an update as to how far it's been processed. But ultimately, what I found was the fastest way to process that type of data was not only to extract the data in smaller chunks, like 200,000 at a time, but to process that data using a Razor script. Nothing beats the speed of doing it through the Razor script. I've tried every which way through low code, through SQL directly. SQL text manipulation is atrocious. So if you're ever doing something where you need to modify large amounts of textual data, don't do it in SQL, especially if you're talking about hundreds of thousands of records, because it will just bog down. The longer you're doing it, the more memory it's eating and the slower it gets. Razor script is always going to beat SQL in that respect. And that was a big portion of the exporting of the data, because it was just a lot of text data that needed to be written to a file. So I used SQL to pull out the records in batches, and I fed that into a Razor script, and I let the Razor script take it from there. And something that every other method used to take somewhere in the vicinity of 15 to 20 minutes to export, I got it down to about 2 minutes. So, just in case anyone's interested.
Thanks for sharing that experience. So as we wrap today, I wanted to thank Andrei for showing and attending today, and just realize Andrei has a special penalty for showing, because it's Friday night at 7 o'clock. His weekend has already begun, and he's here with us. So thanks for being here.
No worries.
All right.
Thank you, Andrei.
Thanks for joining us, Andrei.
You're very much welcome. I'm glad to be here as well.
So as we do, in just a second, I'm going to turn off the recording. We'll go to our Afterglow segment, so hang around, anybody who wants to. And we will, of course, do this again next week. See you then. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.